So Dr. Pankaj, just to inform you, I will just start with the basic introduction. Then, if required, we can get into MVP modules in detail, because how I have structured it, what are HDIs, what is the existing market looks like, the research that we did in Strategy Council, what is a configurable HDIS and components that link it to NDHB and stuff. This is how I have put in, and the implementation part of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is fine. But somewhere, maybe toward the end or something, you have to tell them which are the minimum, MVP modules and what are add-ons.
Yes. Yeah, those are covered. Those are covered in this slide deck. Yeah.
Because everybody needs to understand that in the market, there is a lot of fluff being sold. But as a specialist team that we are here, we need to know what is the core.
Right. Sure, sir. Sure. Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is just an agenda, but there is more. The MVP modules are also part of it. I think Sonali, Raghav, Akriti, and Aditi, it's a revised version for you. I have already done this for them in their IHMR session. So how this health delivery information system emerged? I think all of you know how it emerged, because earlier, before our strategy council, everyone used to call them public health information system, hospital information system, a GP clinic app. There are various names. Mostly commonly used was HIS, but if you call hospital information system, it does not. It basically excludes the GP clinics and other smaller capabilities that any HDIS system can provide. So HDIS system, like Ved always explains, what is a class? So HDIS system is a single parent class, in short. It defines different type of health information system we use to collect and manage the clinical data, specifically clinical data. It can be a public health system like NICSHE application. It can be an EMR system. It can be HIS system. It can be a pregnancy tracking app. All of these will come under HDIS. And the basic design principles of all remain same. Only the number of functions or number of data elements required may be different, depending upon the functionality. Second, this slide you guys are already aware of, which Dr. Pankaj always keeps talking about, why we run this SCA or the accelerator that we do. Most of the big hospital information system provider, HDIS providers, are no more active in Indian market. Most of them have already left, like iSoft, Track Health, TCS, Wipro. Again, based on the monolithic architecture they were based, configurability was lacking. Plus, Indian market doesn't pay. How a monolithic cost is something Indian healthcare market or hospitals cannot afford. Especially when you come down to North India, the costs are costing is really bad that they can afford. And they don't want to spend because they don't see the worth. This has been there. This is a thinking process of a CIOs who feels that I can still run a hospital without a good system. I just need a basic system or just a billing module. So that is a traditional thinking. That is why these big firms or big HDIS providers cannot survive in Indian market, and they start looking out in Gulf and US markets. Akhil, Srishti, they're already there in our SCA members. Srishti definitely is trying their best to adopt to the new standards. Akhil, again, it's similar, like till the time I am not forced to do anything, I won't make a change. They are still of the same perspective. Digital startups, we already are well aware about digital startups because they are the people who have started thinking about scale fast, start small perspective. All these startups, they start with something in their hand, but then automatically the more the funding increases, they can keep adding on. That is why they are the most flexible for any change. Yeah. This is again just example of some of the startups that were studied during during the strategy council, like MFine, SevaMom. Many of them are teleconsult platforms. MedRecords are similar to what UniMedNet or vCura provides, a repository, a health data repository. These are just a list of it. HDIS solution right now in the market, this is a slide that talks about them. Primary care, it's Practo. Everyone knows about Practo. It started as an appointment making system, but now they have added more modules. But again, it's no more just an HDIS. It is more of a lead generation platform now. They just focus on the lead, the number of consumers they can get to a doctor. Napier, DocEngage, Live Health, My Healthcare. These are just example of primary care. Sonali, can you tell me what is primary care? A very basic question. Or any of you? The analyst group.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Primary care is day-to-day care. If we can simplify. Yes, ma'am.
Like example?
Ma'am, example like daily health checkups.
Okay. So primary care deals with any care that is given in an outpatient setting. Outpatient setting that I don't need an admission for. I don't need to get admitted to a hospital. So this is all primary care. This is the first point of care. First time when you sneeze or you have a common cold, you do visit your GP. That is primary care. Hospitals get, OPD was never a model for hospital, but they do it today. But normally hospitalization is required for only IPD care. Dr. Pankaj, am I right here? Or you want to elaborate more? Because this is the basic difference that they need to understand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Primary, as the word primary indicates, is the first point of contact. So that's the primary care setting where you meet the healthcare professional for the first time. Now, that could be a doctor, it could be a nurse, it could be an ANM, it could be an ASHA. But, in a public health setting, it will be usually an ANM or an ASHA. Whereas in a private health setting, it could be a registered medical practitioner, which could be a qualified doctor, or people who are practicing for a very long time. So that's your primary care. And primary care can also be built into secondary and tertiary care as outpatient clinics.
Ma'am, I have a question. Like, ma'am, we have also studied like primary care is for the health promotion and health prevention. So that does not come in this category?
That does, right? So for example, you had a common cold. You immediately went to your GP clinic. He gave you some medication, anti-allergic, and you're fine. While on the other hand, if you don't go to your primary care provider, you keep waiting, you get a viral, you get infected, and then you require an admission. So this is what primary care does. If it's basically getting to the diagnosis really faster, that it can be solved at primary care. You are basically doing a preventive measurement. It will also include not just treating you very in the initial stages, but also to providing you guidance that what to do that you don't end up into hospital or a GP clinic. Hence, primary care, Dr. Pankaj always talks about, whenever he talks about the financial lever, which Ayushman Bharat is, and why health and wellness centers were proposed. This is the basic reason, because if we strengthen the primary care, we will not need hospitalization. The cost will get reduced, but there will be better preventive measures. It's similar to when we say cancer, if figured out in the first stage, can be cured, but when it goes to second or third stage, it is very, very difficult. So this is why primary care is very, very important for capping the cost, also from a preventive measure. So this is just a brief of what an HDIS can constitute of. So a health delivery information system, depending upon the objective that it was built on, can have different modules. Like, for example, registration module that you already aware, how a patient gets registered. There can be a billing module. So basic 2 modules that any hospital clinic requires are registration and billing. If I am able to register a patient, I should be able to create a bill for the patient. Billing may not be very important for public health, basically for public hospitals, but for the private health, registration billing is the backbone. And this is where people, for like in India, the hospitals think if I have a good registration and billing model, I am good. They just always forget and ignore the clinical data capturing part of it, the clinical record management. They only focus on business because for a hospital, it's a business model. For them, unfortunately, from a noble profession, it has become a business. But there are other modules like ADT modules, which is nothing but admission, discharge, transfer. There are also nursing module where a nurse in hospitals have a lot of things to do, like a bed management, transfers, bedside procedures. There are certain nursing work benches are there to tell them what to do. Like how they changes shifts. They have a handover procedure. All those come under nursing modules. EMR, you already know what is an EMR. EMR basically helps you record patient clinical data and also provide orders that will basically result in a healthcare outcome, a desired healthcare outcome. EMR will capture patient complaints, patient allergies, patient medical history, family history, on patient chief complaints and symptoms. On that basis, a doctor will arrive at a diagnosis, prescribe tests and medications, or a referral if required. So EMR is the code, which India doesn't appreciate too much. And you can see the result right now. Emergency module, yeah. Any questions? Yeah. Emergency module is nothing but an emergency. How do you handle an emergency case? It can be an outpatient emergency case, or it can be an inpatient, which immediately requires emergency admission. Basically, when you come for a road accident, you end up in the emergency department and not go to the normal OP flow where you have to first do the registration billing. Emergency is an exceptional scenario where you skip the first few steps of a workflow. And then you are basically, your care is given at first point of contact rather than asking you details about your registration and billing. LIS basically deals with lab information systems. Whatever the doctor has prescribed in the EMR, those orders goes to lab if the hospital has an lab integrated, which deals with sample collection and configuring the lab modules to arrive at result, trends, and again upload result and provide reports to the EMR again. So LIS basically handles with anything that happens in a lab. RIS again, anything. RIS is for radiology information management. All your images, earlier they used to be X-rays, now there are DICOM images. RIS basically handles the entire workflow. For example, from the time an order was, a radiology procedure was ordered for a patient, to checking in patient in the queue, in the waiting area, then passing the same order to the modality. Depending upon which modality you need, what goes through the patient, what comes out, how the results are interpreted. Radiologists then review the results, they write the report, upload and save. So the entire workflow for any imaging procedure is taken care by the RIS module. Pharmacy, you already know all the pharmacies, even the normal pharmacies we visit, which is not part of a hospital. You need a prescription to get a medication other than the OTC drugs. So dispensing, pharmacy module in itself is an inventory module for medications. So it takes care of dispensing, indenting, issuing medications to patients. Pharmacy module, good pharmacy modules also have an inbuilt CDSS. For example, a patient has recorded a drug allergy and I am trying to dispense a drug which may have the component, the generic component with which the patient might have allergy with. It will always trigger, it will always notify the pharmacist that you should not prescribe this, please prescribe an alternative. Then it's a pharmacist's choice, he can always take a decision on top of it. And similar CDSS is on the ordering side also. When a doctor is trying to order the medication from EMR, the same kind of CDSS logic runs there also in good EMRs. Diet module is normally used in IPD scenarios because if you know, when you get admitted, your entire diet is already pre-planned. So most of it, keep it manual. There are manual diet sheet depending upon the patient type and what, but they do. You can always use a digital system for diet because you can configure the food item list, availability, protein, how much protein a patient is supposed to consume, how much fat, how much carbs. Similarly to what a Healthify does, Healthify app, what it does, it basically has all those masters inbuilt that you can actually plan a diet for yourself if you are trying to lose weight or you are trying to maintain weight. So diet module is similar in function what these diet apps do for you. Inventory management is very critical for the hospitals because this basically takes care of every single item or supply that hospital needs. Inventory module, I'll get into the detail or high level functionalities of inventory module in later part of the training. But inventory module deals with
chain management that you might have heard in as part of ERP systems. So majority of the hospitals, large hospitals or large healthcare establishments, not even just hospitals, they usually employ a supply chain management module taken from an ERP system integrated into an HIS. In some cases, they do have an inventory management system built into an HIS, but majority of them would sort of take it from an ERP system. There are a few of those which are specialized for healthcare. I'm forgetting those names right now, but there are a few which are specialized on healthcare. And so inventory management starts from the main warehouse and goes all the way up to the point of care. So, from the main warehouse to the local store, from local store to sub store, from sub store to, the hospital pharmacy, from the hospital pharmacy to, it'll go to the store on each floor, and from there to the nursing station, from the nursing station to the point of care, which is the bedside. So that's how your entire inventory flow is. There are multiple ways of managing it. So the system has to make sure that, anytime the material is taken out from that, there is an entry that is made into the system. So it's minus. Every time you add something, so you sort of add it to the list. Also, there is this thing, sort of indenting mechanism. So the nurse, what will they do is every morning they know that so much amount of inventory I will need for the day, which is not really prescription, or it could be prescriptions also, but these are regular inventory. For example, how many injections she has to give, how many IVs she has to. Usually, so many beds or so many IVs I will need. So many, over-the-counter tablets I will need. So those sort of things she usually has. So what she will do is she will indent those many for the day. And then, she'll just keep using from the indent. And at the end of the day, then, there's a stock check. So what she does is before she hands over the shift to the next, she will do a plus minus and then, replenish the inventory of the nursing station, and whatever is remaining, that is handed over to the next nurse. So inventory management is a very complex task in a hospital because it is said that doctors are giving orders everywhere and they are being executed almost simultaneously, which is very unlike any other industry. And that is the reason inventory management specialization. So, that's another challenge, that the point of care inventory management is always part of HIS, and all the inventory management, which is procurement and storage and labeling, and discarding and all that. So whatever is expired or broken or damaged, that is discarded, and so there's a process for that also. So all that is part of your stores. Now, all the store inventory management is all your supply chain management, but when it comes to the point of care clinical inventory management, that is all your nursing stations and point of care, which is bedside. That is part of your HIS. Now, how do you integrate these two different things? Now, always from a technology perspective, it is a challenge. There's no straight answer, but there are some HIS systems that have done very well, and the others who sort of do it every time the implementation is done. So integrating with your backend supply chain management is something which usually is a check. Whenever I go for auditing, this is one thing I check, that if I minus one thing from the point of care, does it automatically reflect in your backend system? Priyanka, are you back?
Yes, sir, I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
No issues.
Yeah. So like we have inventory management, we also have CSSD. This is nothing but the central sterilized unit. If you know, whenever you go to a doctor, even for a normal vaccine, they use a sterile syringe. Similarly, there are gloves that are being used when a doctor wants to check an injury, and especially when it comes to OT. If a hospital has a good OT, it will definitely have a good CSSD management system in place. So all the sterile part, because every time there is an OT schedule running, for example, there is a scheduled surgery tomorrow. Day prior, the nurse and the doctor responsible, they put the indent, like Dr. Pankaj already said. There will be indent. He will indent is nothing but request for an item. He'll put down the entire checklist against which he will need all this in sterile. There will be some items which will be marked as CSSD. Those are category. This is a category of those equipments or items. So they'll request to the CSSD. They'll keep it sterile and ready for the doctor to use during the surgery. So everything that happens in CSSD, basically after the OT, all those materials get submitted, then they are autoclaved, then they are sterile, then there's a check, okay, which can I use again, which we cannot use after once. All these things are handled by CSSD department. And CSSD is again act as a sub-store, which will once they need more items, they'll obviously raise a indent, which is a request to the main store to refill those items. And then the entire process goes in. So like Dr. Pankaj said, it is very, very critical to have these connected. The problem arises when these two things are not linked. Whenever a doctor is prescribing a medication, or it can be as simple as a cotton swab used in a department or a GP clinic. Once it gets replenished, I have to beforehand have stock of those cotton available with me. So these 3-4 things are always linked. The inventory, CSSD, OT, or the procedure or treatment room. Treatment room is again nothing but where, there's no separate module as such required in a treatment module. Treatment room, it's basically a recovery room where a patient can be kept. It can also be as simple as an OPD, where you went for an injury or you need half an hour, you need a saline. You just need a saline. And for half an hour, the doctor will give you saline, he'll charge you for that and you leave. Dr. Pankaj, please correct me if I am wrong, because this treatment room module is not separate module as such.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
Ma'am, I have a question. Treatment room is the room in which the patients are being kept after the operation?
See, no, that room we cannot call treatment room. I don't know, we prepared this modules during strategy council, but in the OT part of it, there is an OT room, OT which is being booked. Then there is a recovery room, then there are ICUs, and then the patient again once normal or stabilized, moves to the normal ward. The treatment room is a
very often you also go for follow-up dressings and stuff like that. So there's a room needed to do a follow-up dressing, which is usually in a treatment room.
Question.
Yeah.
Treatment room, as far as I might understand it wrong as well, but usually we call it where consultations, examinations, and minor OT procedures are happening. For example, drainage or any basic wound cleaning and everything. So all of that comes in the treatment room, and OT is completely different.
Right. Treatment room is basically in the outpatient setting. Keep one small room for normal procedures. If it's a daycare clinic, it will be a daycare room, daycare surgery room where minor procedures can be done. But for a normal GP clinic, it can be just one single bed for saline, for bandages, for injuries, for such smaller procedure that doesn't require an admission or something.
Yes, just like when we go to an MI room, they'll dress the wound as well. They'll give us basic stitches. They'll put the basic saline, and
exactly.
They put on plasters, cutting of plasters. All of that happens in that treatment room. It is not as broad as an OT,
right,
but basic examinations, consultations, and minor procedures take place there.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Similarly, there are other modules like blood bank, therapy, the modules, some like Dr. Pankaj always say, there are some basic modules, which is nothing but the MVP we keep talking about. These all things you can actually create an entirely new module for a specific function, or you can utilize the same MVP. It doesn't matter, and MVP can actually support all of this. If I have an MVP, HIS MVP, which has registration, billing, inventory in place, and an OT, I should be able to manage, and an EMR, I should be able to manage all of these. Treatment room is just a room where you provide a treatment. You just have to record it in the EMR. What was the treatment provided? You have to tell the inventory or CSSD what all did you use for the patient that needs to be sterilized again, or needs to be replenished, or needs to be restocked. So you can actually play around with just that MVP module. These are all fancy names that have come out from a business model perspective, because in monolith architecture based application, they used to sell the product on the basis of number of modules you want to use. Sometimes, so this is how they used to sell it. Even if you don't use an inventory module, they'll still sell it. They'll still bill you for that, because that's how it was built. Even one single module doesn't get used, there might be issues with one module dysfunction. Hence, all this came into picture. Yeah. For example, there is a module you can see here, telemedicine. But if you ask me or Dr. Pankaj or Krishan sir, he will just say it's just a tool. They have just put a Skype in between or an audio tool to call the consulting doctor, which is similar to requesting an appointment. Whether you visit the clinic or you just get on a call with the doctor, it's one and the same thing. Just the technology changes. Otherwise, everything in the telemedicine module remains the same. It will have EMR in place. It will have orders in place. You will have to record symptoms. You will have to tell patient what to do, what not to do. The only thing which will not be part of is you can't actually see the patient physically. Otherwise, it's the process, the data you capture, the orders you make is one and the same. It's not actually a different module or a MVP module with a WhatsApp chat box is equivalent to a consultation. When I just pick up my phone and ask doctor कि मुझे जुकाम हो रही है, मैं क्या लूं, and he says कि कोई भी anti-allergic ले लो. It's similar to that. So this is how these systems used to sell, and that is where Dr. Pankaj and Krishan keep saying about microservices modules or SaaS model. Only pay for what you use. Yeah. The major siloed HIS systems still have these modules you can actually play around with, and you can do integrations. Obviously, those integration will be more point-to-point integration if you have to interact with another application which is outside these modules or HIS. The problem arises at the public health. Because if you have seen, Sonali, you have already worked on the data elements. If you would look at the outreach module, that is the connecting link between the public health and when patient ends up into a hospital. What major mistakes a public health designing systems have done is they have actually digitalized the forms. For example, they have to do a check mark saying diagnosis of tuberculosis. You just actually need diagnosis code there. So if you use a MVP in the outreach module, you will not need NICSHA separately. You will not need Anmol separately. These are just task-based and clinical protocols that you can play around with using the same 5 fields. So that is why we came up with this outreach module, because this is completely missing. In the name of outreach module, there are so many vertical programs running today, which we don't even need if we just implement the MDDS based outreach module on NDHB standards. We can actually wipe out the entire vertical programs. Dr. Pankaj, any perspective here?
To be spoken of in this room only.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't tell anyone you're going to wipe them out.
Yeah. So I'll just jump. So we already know the challenges, how the systems were designed, how they don't talk to each other. There are certain, like only in this room, I can always say that is also a way of making money. If you ask me, siloed system, that means you have a control over your client. For example, what is happening in Rajasthan is the same thing is happening because they had implemented the HIS long back, and when it got implemented, the health department was not even consulted. It was the IT department of the state who got OHAM in place and got implemented, and the clinical module was never used. Even today, it wasn't used. That is why they are vendor locked, because they had just done a statewide implementation. So everywhere there is OHAM. So nobody else can enter there, because they always say even when government wants to get more applications in place, they'll always say, why do you need more application? Our modules are still running. We can do an entire health information exchange. If you'll bring another one, there will be integration cost, and then the exchange would not happen. This is how they reason out with the client. And obviously client would just agree. Ki kaun karega integration wala jhanjat? Let's just use the same system everywhere. And this is how the interoperability can be maintained. So challenges remain the same: siloed system, low interoperability, little system flexibility for quick change. For them in a monolithic architecture, everything is customization. When the systems were designed, they were always designed keeping in mind one single client who actually requested for it. So it was hard coded in the system. So it is not configurable. For example, if you look at the tuberculosis reports, I mean the NICSHA reports, or the way the data gets captured, diagnosis of tuberculosis type this, diagnosis of tuberculosis type 2. You tell me, how will I configure this system for tracking pregnancies or tracking pregnant women in the same district? I can't do it. I have to again write a form similar. So they have just digitalized the form. That's what they have done. But if it is diagnosis to be captured as pregnancy, there is an ICD code for pregnancy also, and there are ICD codes for the stage of pregnancy also. So I just have to change my diagnosis list. That's all I have to do. I just have to select the right code. That is called configurability, which is lacking in India right now. And last issue is more from the governance perspective, which is one citizen, multiple government experience. So I am also a patient in Anmol. I am also a patient in NICSHA. I have to deal with a health worker for NICSHA. I have to again deal with another health worker for RCH. So this is how I am being guided by different people, controlled by different people. and end result is I don't have actual visibility of what is happening on my health side. Also, we are as Indians also unaware to ask for it, especially the rural population. They never ask for it. So this is something that we are trying to change through NDHB, and government also have a vision of changing this. When is the question we have? And major reason of them in silos is again that Krishnan sir has already covered in HDD. We don't have unique health identifiers. For example, if you see Kerala, why Kerala was able to have longitudinal record, we may not call it a completely digital longitudinal record, but at least they do have, because they use Aadhaar ID, because government hospitals are allowed to use Aadhaar ID for identification. So they told all the health workers to collect Aadhaar IDs from every single household, and they created a patient registry and they registered those patients. And now any public health facility, irrespective of which district you visit in Kerala, they will have access to your previous records also, because the unique identifier, Aadhaar was used as the unique identifier for that population. But again, the same information may not be available to the private healthcare providers. Keeping in mind, Kerala has a good public hospital management or public health facilities. They are still at a better stage than other states, and they are the mature state when it comes to digital health. We don't have, we don't have. Yes, bolo.
मैम जैसे हम बात करते कि लॉन्जिट्यूडिनल रिकॉर्ड्स कहीं किसी और के पास भी जाएंगे तो वी कैन एक्सेस इट फ्रॉम देयर आल्सो. In that case, do we require a similar system, or it can be from a browser or just a login ID or password that can be put anywhere and we can download that previous record?
So this is the problem that we are facing. The source systems are so different from each other. The way they record information for a patient, the way they generate outputs for a particular encounter are so different that two systems cannot talk. Even if you want to share, the only option for now, for example, how they do is some of these medical repository providers, how they do it, they upload the scan copy from one hospital to their Medilockers. They just provide patient number, patient phone number as the ID, and they use some kind of patient consent that when the one provider, one GP refers the patient to another GP, the GP gets for some time, some period of time, they make the information available, readable for the referred physician. That is all they are able to do that. But tomorrow, if we really want to have longitudinal records, we definitely have to at least, to bare minimum, have to use the e-objects that we talk about. Because even if one encounter note can be standardized, even if they reside in different source system, because if Akhil system generates an encounter note, it will be in their they will store it. Similarly, when a Srishti creates an encounter note, that will store it. Both the encounter notes will have an encounter ID, will also have a date, so that when I want to look, I as a patient want to look at my entire timeline view, I will be able to actually get those. Okay, on this date, this hospital created this record of mine. On this date, the other hospital, because they were all in the same structure, similar data elements, similar value sets, I will be able to draw that record. But otherwise, it's as simple as uploading in our normal Google Drive, uploading data and then managing it on our own date-wise. That's all it will be. You cannot actually run anything on it.
Yes, ma'am. So in Kerala, ma'am, what do they exactly do?
I don't have much details about it, but what they do is they have one single system for all the public health facilities, and they use Aadhaar ID. And they also use, what they have tried to do is they have at least standardized basic elements like diagnosis. They have standardized, they use a list. They use a standard code directory. I think they use ICD or SNOMED. One of these they use. Similarly, they have standardized some of the data elements. Symptoms, you may not see them as a standardized list. You may not even see medication as a standardized list. But yes, to start with, even the pharmacy medication can be standardized if you just start importing the NFI, which is nothing but Jan Aushadhi prescriptions. We can, even if just standardize those few elements, it should be good enough to start as a starting point.
Okay, sure.
Dr. Pankaj, are you there? You have a better perspective of Kerala. What is Kerala doing in e-health?
He's not here.
Not there? Okay. Yeah. So at least they have solved some problem. At least, for example, if you ask me that question, again, OHAM has done the similar approach. All the public health facilities in Rajasthan has OHAM HIS. Yes, they were never using the clinical module. But for COVID, they are using the clinical module to capture details. Now, even if patient visits another PHC, he should be able to get that data. Or the doctor at the PHC will be able to get the patient previous data. They have just started it, so I won't say it's clinically rich or we have enough data in place. But again, it's one vendor dependency. If I use same app, it is easier for me to get the entire data. But why NDHB comes into picture, it creates a level playing field for everyone. Everyone has a unique USP that one application may not provide. So I can use multiple applications that work with each other and have the same data in place.
Ma'am, in the HMIS, the Health Management Information System, ma'am, do they just only capture the if he's a TB patient or if he is a AIDS patient, they just do that, or they also capture the clinical details?
No, they don't capture the clinical details. They don't capture the clinical details.
They just put the name in that particular.
Yeah, only the notifiable disease they had given HMIS to all the hospitals to publish whenever a patient with a notifiable disease comes into the hospital. So they have to push, okay, these many patients with this diagnosis had come here. And again, they don't use an ICD. They have a local diagnosis. So for example, like we have ICD for diagnosis, what hospitals usually do is they create their own diagnosis list. So I'll just create fever, tuberculosis, diabetes, type 1, blah, 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 blah. So every hospital or every application will have a different master data. That is the
question.
Yes.
Just for example, for tuberculosis patients, they're all supposed to be reported under NICSHA itself. But just in case if the patient goes to a private hospital. So when we were there in the TB unit, they told us that the private hospitals are supposed to inform the TB unit, the local TB unit, that this kind of a patient has come in. So they will just put a mark that a patient has arrived and then they're going to refer it to the TB unit?
No, so it doesn't happen digitally. What they'll do is just call up the TB unit and yeah, in HMIS, they'll definitely mention this patient with TB had come here. They will just mention it. They have to submit. If they treat such a patient, they will mention it in HMIS or they'll just directly refer the patient back to the TB unit. Because again, if NICSHA was made on the base on MDDS basis, they would not need this process in place. The moment patient comes to this hospital and the doctor will already get his TB data. Okay, he's a NICSHA patient and he'll be able to basically refer back or work along with the NICSHA program. Yeah. Because, patient can always choose where he wants to go. He wants to avail a private facility. He should be free to go. And all his data that the government has captured, for example, he was treated for TB since last 3 months. That data should be available with the private healthcare provider so that he can take the right decision depending upon the present condition. Now, what the hospital will do, will ask him to do, again, will do n number of tests and bill the patient for that. If the earlier data was available, he would not be required to do that. So this is the problem they have. So, the major challenges HDI, especially when it comes to clinical record management and clinical data entry, comes in. Beautiful systems have been built, but not adopted, because the basic adoption, either we need a lathi that Modi normally has, or we need a financial incentive, or the third part, which is always missing, the design should be intuitive. The design should be very, very intuitive. For example, who taught you to book cab from using Uber? Anyone taught you? No. It was intuitive enough that you started using it. How these small apps are designed, Swiggy app, Uber app, these are all intuitive UIs. You actually don't need training there. These are some of the reasons that are listed in front of you are why these HDIs never get adopted. Inertia to change. Hospital management still think I can run on just a billing and a registration module. They don't want to change. ठीक है ना, बना तो रहे हैं 5 साल के लिए, हम हार्ड कॉपी रख रहे हैं ना, दीमक लग गया तो क्या हो गया, रखा तो है ना, legally we have kept them there, right? No incentives. One is the patient doctor ratio in India is very, very bad. Second, there is no incentive given to them for any clinical data entry. If we start providing some incentive to motivate them, because it will only increase the burden. The incentive can be financial incentive. The incentive can also be in other forms that government can think of. Low digital literacy, especially the old doctors, they are still not very system friendly. For them, entering and typing data is very, very difficult. For such people, how Facebook works, they are still be able to use Facebook. All our fathers have moved to WhatsApp and Facebook today. Again, it's the design part. All those can be handled if the design of the application, the UI is also focused while you design an application. Same process, it's leadership bound. If the leadership wants it, okay, I want my entire hospital to go paperless. There is one CEO who really wants it. Till the time he will be there in that hospital, this will happen. But the moment he'll move out, other people who were part of that plan and that aim will also move out. And again, it will be come dependent upon the next CEO who joins the hospital. So it's again leadership bound. It's not it's not taught during their medical education. It's not taught. So it is not inbuilt to them to put data in place in a digital format. They are just bounded to do it because of leadership, because of incentives, because of money. When the Max Healthcare transformation had happened, all the doctors have, especially because it increased the burden on the JR, junior doctors. So they refused to do any data entry because their work had increased. But what Max did was they gave them 40% rise in their salaries. And they had to do it. They had to do it because at least they got some incentive to do it. And this is why Max was a success. The adoption happened because of finances also. Mandated reporting. Right now, if you see even the MCI guidelines, clinical act guidelines, they definitely give, okay, this is how you should report. But it is nowhere mandated that you have to submit patient data exactly in this format, like how it happens in the US or in Dubai. There is no mandate. And without a mandate, a country like India, secular country like India, will never work. Namesake regulations, again, same. Have I ever said that 60%, for example, when the Obamacare had come into picture, the meaningful use, they had mandated 20% of all the orders should be online. Just 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes. Yeah. Similarly, technology-wise, they again built, not adopted. It's simple. Again, it's highly complex, inefficient designs, no standards in place, and they are more customized and configured. So how to design scalable, configurable, interoperable HDIS? This is where NDHB came into picture. That how will you be able to design a configurable HDIS which also interoperates. So basically, if one hospital has captured patient information, patient details, for example, even patient name, IDs, demographics, if he goes to another hospital, he should be able to get that detail ready, then again doing a data entry for the same patient. How this problem will be solved? When the government implements registries, patient registry, doctor registry, hospital registry in place. Again, this is these are some of the principles I have just briefly mentioned here. What do we need in a configurable and integration to create a configurable HDIS? Which are the building blocks? Consent. Dr. Pankaj and Krishnan has already spoken about it. Till now, a hospital controlled our data. Even if we ask them to give a digital copy, they'll never give it to us. But now, because of NDHB, it says the data owner of the data is patient, and they can anytime ask for the data from any hospital. And if they want to share it with another hospital, the hospital cannot deny. Similarly, there will be patient safety and quality of services. If we have digitalized data, we will be actually able to assess the quality of care that was provided. For example, a simple readmission rate can tell me if the quality of care that was provided during an admission was not sufficient. Patient was discharged and he got admitted for the same diagnosis in the coming week. That is a readmission. In US, how they manage readmissions is normally payer controls it. According to them, if there is a readmission case, because they have digital claims, they pay whenever the patient gets discharged. Immediately after the settlement, they get the payment. But if the same patient got readmitted for the same diagnosis, irrespective of this hospital or another hospital, the government penalized them 3 times the amount that was paid to them. That means you compromise on the quality just to bill the patient or bill the government again. So this is how they handle patient safety and regulations. These are just the same thing that Christian has already taught you, design principles. So I will not get into details. Yeah. Again, to be able to make health information system interoperable, we need unique identifiers for all these 4. Personal health identifier, which is nothing but a patient health identifier, similar to our Aadhaar card. Provider identifier, I should know which. I see the latest telemedicine guidelines. It says the patient at all times should be aware who is the provider he's talking to, what are his qualifications. All these patients should know, and similarly, the doctor should know who is the patient who is talking to him, what is his age, what are his demographic details, so that he can make the right decision depending upon the identification of the patient. So we need identification of all these to be able to make it interoperable. This is what Dr. Pankaj was talking about in detail, that even though we have those fancy names like CSSD module, blood bank module, telemedicine module, when we did this research and we argued a lot with him to arrive at this conclusion that we actually just need few MVP modules to survive. What are MVP? What is the definition of MVP? The minimum required modules or functionalities that I need to run a hospital. This is what MVP concept, even in computing and programming, is the same. The minimum required product that I can actually go to market with. Rest I can keep adding on. I can keep adding feathers to it. But what I need to actually solve the basic core problem. The core modules of MVP are, again, appointment. I need an appointment management system, because anyways, patients can request appointments. On the basis, there will be a better queue management if there is an appointment system in place. I will need registration module to register a patient. I will need a billing module to bill the patient who visits my clinic or hospital. I will need a basic EMR, even if it's just a SOAP note, SOAP, just those many information to be captured. I don't need a full-fledged EMR. I just need that much to start with. I will need ADT. ADT again, I still don't completely agree to it. But ADT we need for admission, to manage admissions. Admission, discharge, transfers. As a hospital, I do. Primary care may not need ADT, but secondary care will need ADT to run their business, because their business runs on number of patients they have treated in the IPD department. And if you would have worked with any of the hospitals earlier, you will always see a report which says what was my OPD to IPD conversion. So they capture that report always. Hence, we can keep talking about strengthening the primary care, which is OP care, because it has become a money-making business. Even if I may not require an admission, I will end up in a hospital. So that is where a decision-making should come in a patient's hand, and the data, the clinical record should be available for other doctors that he can take a second opinion on. LIS, without LIS, a hospital cannot survive, because all the orders that investigation orders will arrive to a lab department, and they will have to manage result against each patient with each type of investigation that was ordered for the patient. Pharmacy, again, without a pharmacy, we may not survive, but definitely we can, even if we just have capability of ordering medication, the patient should be free to go to any pharmacy, or if there is interoperability or direct order, a patient can always, like we order, how do we, when Grofers started, have you used Grofers ever? So Grofers, you can choose the store you want items from. So it's more like an aggregator. Similarly, if tomorrow we have this, at least our e-prescription encounter object, e-prescription object is standardized and accepted throughout, I am a doctor, I can always write the prescription, and then patient himself or doctor in his application can ask the patient, where do you live? So he'll tell, okay, I live here. Nearest pharmacy will be shown using the GPS. He will place the order to that pharmacy, who will also deliver the medication at patient's home. How these Amazon and Grofers, etc. works. It will be so much easier. And you will not be bounded to buy the drugs from the same hospital pharmacy. You will have a freedom to choose which pharmacy you go to. But a pharmacy module is very, very critical even for the pharmacies to run, because they need to know what all medication they have procured, what are the, they'll have details, there will be classification of drugs, saying OTC drugs, antibiotics, drugs which require a mandatory prescription, drugs which you can actually dispense to the patient without any prescription, those classifications, what is your stock, what is the stock which is getting over. So all these, pharmacy management system is also an inventory management for drugs with order, dispensing, decision-making powers. RIS, I have already explained, it is a radiology information system. All the X-rays, radiology procedures, etc. are part of the RIS, which again connects to the EMR. So all the reports, EMR plus LIS plus RIS actually forms the longitudinal medical record for patient. The add-on modules which we can do without for a hospital are emergency, nursing, surgery management, CSSD, diet. I think inventory will definitely come under MVP, but inventory in itself is a very, very complex module. You already know, when I talk about what do I need for an interoperable HDIS, we need MDDS. MDDS is nothing but master data for the country. To be very honest, it's just that. If I may not need element IDs. If you would have seen, the 1000 data elements have element IDs too. I don't need to store that element ID as long as I just follow. For example, name allows you to capture size of 14 elements. So if other systems are also using 14, it should not exceed more than 14 characters. I should be able to push my patient name to other system. It is that simple. These data elements just give us a reference. These are references. Okay, this element should have this size. This is the recommended format. So for example, even if one system has date as DDMMYY, the other system may have date as MMDDYY. How will you do an exchange here? You won't be able to do an exchange here because the meaning is lost. The common meaning is lost. This is why MDDS was written. So it will basically give the designers or the developers, okay, these are the size and format requirements whenever you are trying to design one single screen to an entire application. And the code directories are nothing but master data, which will be common. Now, every hospital, I will have different set of doctors. I will have different set of procedures. I will have different investigations. But if we use these code directories, everything will be same. Out of these code directories, standard code directories are SNOMED, ICD, LOINC. So even if you know name, even if doctor and hospitals might use different jargons for the same investigation, it actually is the same. If you standardize that list, half of the problem is solved. I will refer my patient saying I had done his blood sugar test. The other person will also know it in the same manner if you just use a standard code directory, because his system also talks about the same thing. The directory, the drop downs are the same. Okay. So first one was using the standardized way of capturing data, storing data that Dr. Pankaj already explained. That is what MDDS is. It gives you standard value sets, so the master data across the country remains the same, and the basic way the information gets captured. So you can actually compare apple to apple, then apple to oranges. Second is microservices. This is, I'm not getting into detail, but this is a way you will be able to build a configurable EMR or an HDIS system, because then it will be based more on the domain expertise and the configurability. You can actually change one function. You don't have to touch the code of the entire system. You will only make changes into one smaller functionality you want to upgrade. That is how a microservice architecture works. I will not get into details, I think. Dr. Pankaj, you want to say anything here? Because I am not getting into details.
No, that's fine. The only thing that needs to be said is that the data elements from that we were talking in the previous slide, they get bundled. So they get bundled into functionalities, and the functionalities get bundled into modules, and modules get bundled into, the MVP. So, the concept of microservices, that you would want a function to have one function to be satisfied by one microservice or a few microservices. So microservices are that granular in nature.
Right.
So that is the purpose of having the microservices design.
Right. So for example, I'll just take a basic example of a monolithic application. There, it used to be the OPD module, which will have functions. But if I want to make changes to my registration service, I will still have to tweak with the entire OPD module code. I will have to affect the visit management part that is being taken care, how I am requesting a visit, how I am actually rendering a service, because the entire OPD module gets touched. While in microservices, what we have done is these small functions, registration, visit management, themselves are single microservices loosely coupled with their own set of database. So for example, registration service uses five data elements: patient name, patient first name, last name, patient age, patient gender, and date of birth. I'll just say 5. Visit management service, if you ask me, what all does it use? Registration service will end up creating a registration ID. Its job is done. It used its 5 data elements, created it, gave a UHID. Visit management service basically is nothing but you are marking a visit for a patient. What will you need? You will actually need just UHID, because if you want to get the patient detail, it is already stored in the registration, stored by the registration service and the database related to it. You don't have to repeat those data elements. Now, visit management service will have UHID, which they will use. It will have time and date of visit and reason of visit. Just these 4 data elements, which has nothing to do with registration services. So can you see the dependency and the light they become? You actually don't have to have 1,000 data elements for each service. You will just have those very specific data elements that help that function to take charge. or do what it is desired from. So if there is a change, quick change I want to make in this registration service, I will only touch these 5 elements. I will not hamper the other elements of other services. Yeah. Similarly, this is how what we did during strategy council was, you have seen MDDA, Sonali has worked on it, Akriti has worked on it, Raghav, Aditi, all of you have worked on it. There are so many data elements. We have mapped those data elements to modules. Modules as in services. Basically, patient registration, I need these 10 elements. So these small modules or functions are nothing but these microservices. So when these all these data elements groups, logical grouping will form one microservice. All these microservices will form a module. For example, OP module, patient registration, visit management, and consultation and billing. These 4 microservices will form a OP module. And all these modules, OP, IP, ADT, these will form the HDIS MVP. HDIS MVP is nothing but a product that you can take to the market. To secondary care, the number of data elements or the amount of information I store as a hospital will increase. And so as the microservice, you keep adding more data elements to it. Yeah. So that was the design part. I think Ved and Krishan sir will be taking it separately. The third part, MDDS is done. Master data, common references, data size, format. A third one, which is very, very important and which normally gets skipped off, is the adoption part of it. The UI part of it. User friendliness of an application, like an Uber, like a Swiggy. Right? In Swiggy, whenever I open my application, I actually see the frequently ordered, the restaurants that I normally order from. That will be on my top list, right? So that I don't have to search through it. Or I will have a functionality to filter. What do you want to see today? So I'll just filter using a dish or a restaurant name, right? So it makes my life easier than scrolling through it. These are basic principles a UI should consider. For example, intuitive user interface. I should not need a training to use an application. I should not. Healthify Me, if you look at, did you guys use training? Any of you, if you have used it? Swiggy, anyone trained you on that? No. That is why it got adopted so easily. Similarly, if the user interface is intuitive enough, it will get adopted to a normal human being. How Facebook, all of us are so, even our parents who are 60 plus, they also use Facebook very seamlessly, and we didn't teach them. We did not teach them. So second, very important aspect of design is minimum clicks at typing and scrolling. Especially looking at the patient-doctor ratio in India, this is something which we really need to be. It should be an Android, like Dr. Pankaj always say. It should be mobile first. Mobile first doesn't mean I have to look at on my mobile. Mobile first also means that a doctor can use a tab, a nurse can use a tab, which will have minimum clicks, almost no typing, and order sets that I can just choose from. What are order sets? Order sets are group of services that I pre-configure as a doctor. I pre-configure, okay, if a person with viral will come to me, I'll prescribe paracetamol, right? But if the viral has been more than 3 days, I will also prescribe an antibiotic. So these are the order set that a doctor can make for himself, or the organization, hospital at an organization level can create these order sets which will have minimum investigations. I need to confirm a diagnosis. It will have prescription to manage that diagnosis, and it will have any follow-up details. For example, if a diabetic patient comes to me and he tells me my wound is not healing, the first foremost thing is I'll ask for their history. If he doesn't tell me that I am diabetic, by chance he didn't tell me that, then I would definitely want to see if the person has diabetes that is not letting the wound heal. And I'll write a fasting blood sugar. So these things are quick orders, and depending upon the specialty or the kind of patients you deal with, you will have similar patients coming to you, and basically you're actually repeating the same test, same prescriptions, same diagnosis again and again. So it's very, very easy to create these order sets and favorites that doctor can always keep. It will just make their life hell easier than going through the entire list to prescribe a drug, medication, or even an investigation. Like today, I mean, when we talk to these startups and other application providers, what they think is, I'll enable the ICD-10 list. Do you think doctor will have time to search through, first learn, train himself on ICD and write and put it in the system? What a vendor should do is let the doctor have its local codes or local diagnosis, the way jargons he uses. In the backend, there should be a way the system should map his jargons with the standard code set. And you actually enable a standardized diagnosis entry. If you ask the user to do it, obviously he will not do it. Even the hospital will not put any money or time in making their doctor learn ICD-10. Similarly, user configurable UI. Every doctor has a way of writing a prescription. You have standardized the information model. You have standardized the value set. Just give him a dynamic form builder, on top of which he will use the same elements, but he will just create the way he wants to look at it. He wants to capture the family history first, and then he wants to capture the patient clinical history. Or I want to first capture the chief complaint, then get into the family history. It should be my way of writing. It should not be how you want the doctor to write. Because end of the day, if your e-objects are standard, your information model is standard, you will anyways get the desired output. But when the user is using it, it is actually according to him. Similarly, there are specialty-based templates. For example, we did this in Max. This was part of the Vista CPRS. Depending upon the specialty of that inpatient department, whenever a patient gets admitted, certain tests are prerequisite. So those are part of it. You just have to click on that specialty template. All those investigations, bedside procedures, tasks that nurse or doctor should do, that comes handy. So you don't actually have to create task lists. You don't have to create patient orders so much. Last foremost is, if all these bad applications still be adopted by doctors if it is clinically rich, which helps them decision making. Just by putting CDSs, the clinical decision support system doesn't solve their problem. Doctors don't want to be told what to do next. They just need a support to arrive to a right decision maker. And how a CDSs will work, you have to actually give a basic rule engine with some rules that the doctor or hospital provides, or clinical protocols that are standardized for the country to start with. And the CDSs will learn the more you use for patients. So, for example, today, even for COVID, a patient comes with sore throat and cough, a wet cough. I will write it at viral. Somebody will write it as COVID. How will CDSs know which is the right diagnosis? But the more patient will come, and the CDSs will learn whenever there is dry cough with a mode of for a continuous period of half an hour with sore throat and fever, only then it is COVID. Otherwise, it's a normal viral or normal common flu. Then he will know to differentiate between the diagnosis, and it can arrive. So our CDSs can also be very dangerous if the rule engine is not done right. If the rules, there are no predefined rules. A CDSs or AI doesn't make any application worth unless until it learns and you have basic rules built into it to control. The final control should be in the hand of the clinician. Yeah. So these are very, very few things which should be included when you basically design an application, which you want to be adopted. Sir, do I need to get into e-objects? It's already 12.
Up to you. I mean,
or you want me to jump into modules? I have taken them through the MVP, but if you want me to get into functionalities of those modules or the high level, I can do that.
I think e-objects are better than going into functionalities of each module.
Absolutely.
We have a class on e-objects tomorrow. in the evening.
You can do e-objects then, sir.
Okay. So you want to go into the details of the functionality?
Just a walkthrough. Do you think they should know how HDIS implementation is? Because it's already 12, so.
Yeah, we should do that. Implementation is something we should talk about.
Okay. Because functionality walkthrough, I can always give them while we are working on the microservices.
Yeah, because the implementation itself is a whole game in itself, and people need to understand how and why is it so long and tedious.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I now once we have designed an MVP, now we have to take it to the market. Once a client finalizes, there are certain things you need to do right to be able to do a successful HDIS implementation. And HDIS can be an EMR, HIS or anything. The first foremost thing that happens is understanding client's requirement, which is basically done through requirement gathering. That I think Sonali and Aditi must be aware of requirement gathering because it's a module in itself. Requirement gathering requirement gathering is very, very critical. First, you need to know what is the problem the hospital or the client is trying to solve. And the tricky part is most of the time they don't even know what is the problem they are trying to solve. That is where the analyst skills comes into picture. So there are ways of doing it. How you can plan out requirement gathering as, for example, first thing you will say, let me look at your current system, if they have any. If they don't have any system in place, you will first go through the forms they use for various functions. You analyze those. If there's a system, you analyze the system. Then you actually sit with a key user and an end user for that particular department to understand their pain points. Where is it where they are suffering? And then what you do is next, because you already have a developed solution, you can only configure it, customize. So always a good analyst will always decide between how much I want to customize and how much can be handled through configurability. So though more configurable application is, the better application will run. Customization tweaks will just add on more code tasks, also increase the cost of implementation. So for the developed HDIS, there's something called solution mapping. Now, when you know client's requirement from all the perspective, you have done use cases, you draw Visio diagrams, you write down the use cases as is and what you recommend as to be. You have done all that. Looked at their current way. There are chances that you might just you might just create an SOP for them. Their current as is structure may be redefined as per the new digital system, which will be a 2B, which is nothing but change in standard operating procedures also. So you will be doing that. Now you already know, as an implementer, you already know your product well. You will come back. You might have a solution mapping template, you might not have. You will try to map each requirement. So requirements can be full of Excel also. It can be 100 requirements written in Excel. So you try to map function-wise requirements to your existing modules and functions and feel, oh, can it be configured? Is it just the master data change or is it just the output change? You do a solution mapping. Solution mapping, with the term you can understand, you are trying to map your solution with the client requirement. Once the document is done, there is a sign-off that happens. The sign-off is an agreement between the client and the HDIS provider that, okay, these were the requirements we mapped and you have agreed to it. And this is what I'll be able to deliver you in the accepted, decided time frame. And this is the cost for it. But if there are customizations that are also part of solution mapping, you just write down the customization and separate costing is done for that. For these things, I'll need more time. For the configurable elements, the system can go live in so much time. But for the customization, it will come as required. And you also prioritize the customization as MVPs. Okay, they cannot do without this customization. So I have to release this in the phase 1. So this is where you actually design a plan for requirements on configurability and customization. Then the analyst team normally hands it over to the design team. or the technical team who would then configure the application. Application configuration can range from loading master data to making changes in how a bill looks like for a hospital. So these are all configurability. You basically play through the admin module where you have these screens and rights available to you to configure the system. You are not touching the code at all. Whenever we say configuration, it means you are not touching the code. When we say customization, it means you are touching the tweaking the code. So this is a basic difference which is completely flawed in Indian market at least. They call custom made for the client. This is customized for the client, which is actually configured for the client. We can customize it in 3 days, which is not actual customization. They are basically just configuring it. Then once we have configured, then you load the standardized master data for them, clean the masters they might have according to your formats type, how you can export, import data with respect to your templates. You might have to clean up, then load the master data, then black box testing. Wait, can you talk about the black box testing part, please? Or Dr. Pankaj?
Either is okay.
Yeah. Dr. Pankaj, yeah. You can tell.
Okay, so the difference between black box and white box is, black box is that you don't know what's there inside it. So, it is, you are only going to give input parameters and say that this is the expected output. If you are getting the expected output, then, it is a pass. If you're not getting an expected output, then it is a fail. It is as simple as that. In a white box testing, you also go into the details about how it is being processed and how, the entire system is working inside that box. So that's a simple difference.
So you are saying white box testing is mostly is done by the developers who are releasing that version of application, and black box testing is something that actually comes to the analyst again to ensure that all the requirements and all the desired outputs is working as expected.
Well, not exactly, because even an analyst can go into the process details of testing every little, input, output, and every node and every decision box and everything. You can, even an analyst can go to that level. But it's two different methods of testing. One is a black box where you only give the input and you wait for seeing the desired output. If the desired output is there, it's a pass. If it's not there, it's a fail. So it could be a technical level testing or it could be a functional level testing. Either.
Yeah. So for black box testing, we also have something called test cases. We have use cases. We have user stories. User stories is basically you actually provide a user story saying, okay, a patient of age 67 had visited, and the total bill should have a senior citizen discount of 50%. And you then test against it, put the input values and see if that is actually happening in the billing module or not. If the discount gets captured, yes, the system is functioning properly. Your even master data is loaded correctly, rules are configured correctly. But if you don't get a discount, then that means it's a fail. So you have to reconfigure it and you report that bug to the configuration development team that this is not working as required. After that set of testing is done at your end, so you don't release the application to the client before this testing, which you do internally. After making sure all the issues are resolved or majority of the issues are resolved, side by side, simultaneously, what also happens is you start a key user training. So any one of you can tell me what are key users? You might have studied in IHMR. No?
Yeah. I'm a representative of For example, the HOD of the ortho department, he'll tell what are the requirements which are important under his specialty.
Yeah, so key users are champions. Key users are champion because normally the model that is preferred is training the trainer, which is more effective because you may go tomorrow. After the implementation, go live, you will only be there for 1 year, but somebody has to take over your responsibilities. So you figure out while your requirement gathering phase itself, you figure out who are the key users or champions. And HOD cannot be a champion because he may not actually get into the system details. But a doctor in charge that an HOD might decide, okay, he will be the point of contact for every training, and he is the one who will design training for the other doctors, other junior doctors, and other staff of the same department. So key user is the champion who will be trained so that he can pass on the trainings. So these key users are basically decision makers on accepting or rejecting a developed or configured module. So first you train these trainers, then there is something called user acceptance test, which is basically used exactly for that. The test cases that your client had provided, the one that you figured out, the storyboard that storyboards are made with the help of the key users only. So once though they again start using at the hospital level, now you have released a version on which they can do a UAT, which is user acceptance testing. You can do it with them or they can keep doing it on their end. So the UAT is done. It's a process which takes some time until they say, when the user say, okay, fine, now we can deal with it. Please release it. That is what a UAT sign off is. A user accepts the modules. Okay, we accept with these requirements. This can come later because it's not high priority. And that is when once a UAT is done, you are ready to go live. Then there will be a proper go live plan with terms of resources you need to support, training, how many, now after key users are trained, how many months of training is required to train the entire staff of the entire hospital or module or department. That is what it comes into. What kind of support you will require. You will require technical people. You will require analysts. You will also require testing team. You'll also require resource team who will be there for the live with the go live phase at the hospital side. You also define the entire costing internally, obviously. Normally, you also define, okay, what are the infrastructure needs, because you have to make sure before you go live, you also may want to make sure that the required infrastructure is in place. And only when you have the entire plan ready, you decide on a go live date. Even before the go live, the various way a go live can happen is you can do a big bang. So you release all the modules, the entire system with a big bang. Or you go phase wise. Okay, let me just release it, this module for this department on this date. Once this stabilizes, I'll release another module on this date. And then I wait for it to stabilize. The third part, which most of them prefer, is there will be a parallel go live. So my existing system keeps running, but few part of my functions, I am also using my new application. So these two processes run in parallel. Dr. Pankaj, can you elaborate the parallel run for them, please? Because you are an expert in all that.
Okay. So, so what happens is in go live, you can go live in multiple ways. You can go live section by section, module by module, little by little, or you can have big parallel runs. So, your system is already running and the organization can say that, I'm not willing to bring it down. And so I will not bring the new system up until I'm completely confident about its running. So what they do is they'll do a parallel run. So in parallel to the existing system, whether it is manual or semi-automatic or completely automatic, the legacy system is already running. and then you switch on the new system also. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages of both. Now, the advantages are that, your old system is still there and you can fall back upon it. The disadvantages are that one, you have to do a double entry. You have to do entry in your old system and in the new system. So there is a workload that goes up. And there's another disadvantage that, the adoption will not happen until people feel that there is no way of going back. Until the people feel that, there is a way of going back, they will not take the hard decision or the effort that it takes to adopt the new system. The comfort level is already established in the users with the old system. They will prefer to continue with that. So this is always been seen that parallel runs are only partially successful. At best, you want to do parallel runs for initial pilot. But then once the pilot is proven, you have to hold the bull by the horns and go big bang.
And the final one is, once you go live, you will have resource planning for it. For example, if there are multiple floors, you will have people at the floor at the nursing station available. Initially, there will be more people so that there is a quick assistance, because support is required from the user side in the very initial stage mode. And then you slowly, you are just doing hand holding. The moment you see that they are getting confident, you start removing your resources there, the support resources, and you take it to the offline support, offline and maintenance support, which may exist as per the AMC contract you have with the client. For these years, I am going to support you on bug fixes, on new releases, on any user support. Normally, for user support, there is also help menus. Nowadays, the new systems are also giving them a training module, a help menu that they will actually won't require this kind of support from the HDIS provider, and they can self-train and qualify and start using the system. Any questions here till now?
Ma'am, I'm just not able to understand the exact difference between customization and configuration.
Dr. Pankaj, can you give an example, please?
Okay. So configuration, very simply, is the implementation you do without making code changes. If you have to go to the code level and make changes at the code level, then it is customization, it is not configuration.
Thank you, sir.
So, Raghav, just an example. If you look at your new phone, whenever you buy a new phone, first thing you go to your contact list. The contact list is pretty standard for every phone. But I want to see my contacts as first name and then last name, or last name and then first name. That's a configurability setting that they have given. That is called configurability.
Raghav, can I add one example?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So in customization, in configuration, we always provide all the options. Suppose if we are providing different colors in front end one page, that means we already implemented that code. And from admin panel, you can just choose that color. But when we are saying customization, that time you have to write down that code. In configuration, that's already there. Just you have to select that option. I'm correct, Priyanka?
Yes. So now we can move to change management. Change management, earlier people used to think change management starts from the go live phase, which is not at all true, and this is what has led to many implementation failures. The change management starts from the day one when a hospital decides that they want to go up with a certain HTIS, or or a certain decision that the top management makes. Change management starts from there. Successful change management happens in only those organizations where everyone from top to bottom is involved, so that they feel that they are part of this change, and you slowly adopt to the change. So basically the feeling of it is my baby comes into picture from the very beginning, even if the CEO has made the decision. But when he was making the decision, he has to articulate this to entire team that they have. Okay, this is what we are trying to do, and this is what, and I am open to listening to what you think of it. This is how it starts. I'll just get into more details on the other slides, and I think Dr. Pankaj, you should be taking the change management part. I am not going to take. This is just elaboration of the assessment requirement. Okay, so this part I missed during the requirement gathering part. So when I was doing requirement gathering, I collected all the information from the client. I have also done solution mapping with respect to my modules, my functionalities. This is something that we should do. Detail out the solution architecture. Basically, you have to figure out after listening to client, what are the modules or what are the functions he needs or the hospital needs. And looking at your application and with keeping in loop your development team, you should also know what is the timeline that these can be delivered. So you can see these blocks. This was done by Dr. Pankaj in one of our previous projects. I have just picked up this slide to tell you how a solution architecture is designed. So you define those blocks and then you put a timeline on the basis of the priority and development effort required. This is how you actually design and then also prioritize. And this is much detailed requirement prioritization. So I did at function level here. But when I want to get into requirement prioritization, I actually get into very much detail. For example, let me take an example of billing module. Billing module they need. Okay, fine. This is a very broad level. They need insurance billing. They need cash billing. So I would say, okay, I'll give you cash billing in 1 month, insurance billing because it's complicated and I have to deal with all the healthcare payers. I will take 2 months. So I prioritize. But the prioritization should also consider if the client has client is enrolled with Ayushman Bharat and it completely runs on it and its cash patient ratio is very, very less, then obviously I have to first roll out the insurance billing part of it. So this is how you prioritize depending upon the emergency or urgency the client has for a particular function and the capability you and your team has to deliver it. So these are two things which are very, very critical to decide on prioritizing a requirement. This is just a sample how we had done it for a client. This I have already covered. This is also I have covered. So this is also I have covered. This is software testing. I have done this also. I have covered. I think Dr. Pankaj, now it's your time. Change management.
Okay, so change management itself is a topic that will take 2 hours, but in short, so in short, what happens is in a typical implementation, you are changing the way the organization is working. So this is an opportunity. Whenever I've done multiple of these implementations. Every time I've done, I go and tell the organization, this is an opportunity for you to improve your own functioning. So please do not superimpose IT on your existing process. Please do not superimpose IT on your manual process. This is a time for process re-engineering. And many times, not many, almost every time somebody has superimposed IT on their manual processes, it has led to disasters. And we are seeing umpteen examples of that in public health. So, this is what we do, that, implementation is not just implementation of the system, but it is called in engineering term BPR, business process reengineering. So in business process reengineering, you do a very detailed workflow diagrams that by now all of you are familiar with. And those workflow diagrams, then we start picking up a pen and start crossing boxes. If I remove this box, will it still work? If I remove this box, will it still work? If I remove this box, will it still work? How lean can I make? So bring the lean thinking into it. So the leaner I can get, the meaner I can get, the better it is. If I can remove people, if I can remove processes, if I can remove decision boxes, and I can still make the system work. Just like the MVP concept, minimum viable product. Similarly, you have to get the leanest and the, in project management, you have the critical path. So you get the critical path of the workflow. And that is the right workflow to be. And the rest of all is fluff. And how do you remove the fluff is a negotiation you enter into with the organization and say, okay, this was all fluff. This can lead to people becoming jobless. This could lead to processes becoming redundant. This could lead to your lot of investments becoming or being written off. But so be it, because you're going to reap the benefits of it going forward. So you should go ahead and do that. Now in change management, you start right from the top. It's a consciousness of the need to change. So there's a cause methodology that I've used. Cause methodology evolved from a couple of other older methodologies that I've worked on. One of them was adopts from Pero Systems, but adopts died with Pero Systems. And then I developed this cause methodology. It has also taken a couple of things from ADKAR, ADKAR. So that's another methodology. So cause is basically consciousness or the need to change, in terms of the organization needs to be conscious as to why do I need to change. The second thing is in terms of aspirations to support the change. So aspiration has to come from inside. If they feel that this is being superimposed on me, it is being forced on me, they will never adopt it. So it has to be, they have to understand, the organization has to understand why I need it. Only then they will adopt it. The third is understanding of how to change. This is all about training. So, you go and do extensive training, but then extensive training will help only when the aspiration is there. If the aspiration is not there, the minds are not open, they will not learn. However hard you may try. You can take the horse to water, you cannot make the horse to drink. Always remember that in IT system implementations. The strength to overcome hurdles and implement the change is a very important piece, because even if people know how to make the change, but at the same time, in terms of implementing, you'll always find hurdles. So there will be hurdles, there will be people who will come up and say that, this is something that is not up to what I expected. There will be emotions, there will be egos. All those things will happen when you're making such a large change, and all of them will become hurdles. And believe me, the biggest hurdle is humans. It's not the process, it's not the technology. So you will have to have strength to overcome the hurdle, and the strength always comes from the top. So the top management has to empower the team that is implementing to be able to overcome the hurdles. There are multiple ways of doing it, and it will require a lot of examples. So I'll probably set up a separate time for that. But hurdles will always come. There is no implementation that goes without hurdles, and you have to continue to support until it becomes an ecosystem. So what I mean by that is, I have been part of so many implementations, and what they do is the change management was not built into it. So they will, and typically most of the IT companies contracts, they end at UAT. I've done UAT, my job done, haath jhaad ke wo chale jate. But in healthcare, pain starts happening only when the rubber meets the road. So the change management and a pretty prolonged, elongated change management has to be built into the contract. Most of the projects fail. You'll be surprised to know that about 90% of the healthcare IT implementations fail in a 5-year time horizon. And the reason for that changing is, reason for that failure is because it doesn't reach the ecosystem stage. Ecosystem is when you have supported it till a point where everybody is supporting each other. So slowly the system takes over. People get used to the new processes. People get used to the new systems, and then you can withdraw. And when you withdraw, it is almost seamless. People don't even know that you have withdrawn. And that is the test of the achievement of the ecosystem, that you are physically there, but you're not supporting, and the system is running well. And that's the time you can disappear, and it's a successful implementation. So I'll stop at that. We can probably have a separate session on cause methodology if you all want, and we'll have to find time for that, because that's also pretty long. It'll take about 2 hours.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys can tell us if you want change management in detail, because it's very, very detailed. That's all.
Very important.
It's very important. It's very, very critical. I think, Dr. Pankaj, you can actually think about it and modify it. How would, if we have to apply cause methodology to our government for NDHB, can we do that? We have to start thinking on that perspective.
That's a good thought, Priyanka, but then, that's a huge paradigm shift, because they do not understand the fundamental that IT is harbinger of change. It's a business process re-engineering. What they do is turnkey project, come and implement IT on my process, superimpose it on my paper process. So by design, it's bound to fail.
Right, absolutely right. But at least we should start thinking here.
Yeah, and umpteen number of examples are there of failures in public health.
Yeah. It will probably improve our sales arguments, our ability to persuade them.
Yes, this is what I was coming to. It will just actually tell us which direction, which approach to be taken to reach out to a particular person. Basically. But I know it's very, very difficult.
It is very difficult, and also to sell it in the private sector, we've had difficulties because there's a cost to it. And, for change management, you need to have people who've been there, done that. So you need, if you put a technical guy along with a clinician and say, I'll teach you how to do this change. The clinician is going to say, buzz off. Right. Now, if you have to go and tell a clinician, come, I'll tell you how to do this. I have done that before. This has to be another clinician of the same level. And that doesn't come cheap. There's a cost to it.
Sure.
And I'm talking about taking it to the ecosystem level. That means it's sustained, very long. So if your implementation is 2 years, your change management is another 2 years.
Probably 3.
Probably 3.
Right, understand, sir. Okay, I think we'll wind up now. Hope you find this session helpful. Any questions, any doubts? Any one of you?
Thanks, Priyanka. Thanks very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.